last but certainly not least, we have Aner Sela. He's a professor of marketing at the University of Florida. He's published extensively in a number of areas, including consumer choice and decision-making. But more recently, he's been interested in the effects of different device modalities on decision-making. And so he and I actually share a number of research interests, so I'm super excited to see some of his work in this area. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you, Sherry. So I want to share with you some findings from a couple of related projects. Miriam was talking about how this is a challenging time slot, so I'm going to take it to the next level and make sure to bring you safely to cocktails and dinner. So like I said, there's a couple of projects at different stages of the publication process, and they're with Camilla Song, who's a former PhD student of mine. So phones are important. There's a lot of work, including a lot of really interesting work from Shiri on how using smartphones as opposed to other devices does something special to how we share information, what information we seek, what we disclose about ourselves. Some of the work that Avi has done, for example, has looked at search behaviors and so on. So definitely a lot of related work on smartphones. I'm sort of historically more of a choice researcher. So I was interested in this question. Does using a smartphone as opposed to other types of devices influence what you actually choose? Or can it influence it? And how you come to perceive your choice once you've already made it. So I want to share with you some findings along these lines. And our starting point was this notion that smartphones are really like no other type of device. They're really personal, private. They're probably our most intimate companion in everyday life. And we take them everywhere. We've all been in these situations. They're really inseparable from the self. There's some existing research suggesting that smartphones are often seen almost as an extension of the self, the private self. So, we asked some people, to what extent each of these different devices, your smartphone, your laptop, your desktop, tablet, to what extent do you see that as personal, private, all to some degree, but look at smartphones, right? Smartphones are way up there, really like no other device. To what extent do you feel your device, that respective device, is like an extension of yourself, a part of your identity? Also, smartphones are way higher than anything else. Interestingly, tablets, even though we think of them technologically as maybe closest to smartphones, they're actually way at the bottom, maybe because we just don't use them as much. They're used differently. And so everything we associate with smartphones, we don't necessarily associate with tablets. So this is kind of the setup for where we're going with that. There's something very personal, very intimate, very much you about your phone. Using phones is also ergonomically different. It creates a very narrow focus of attention. It insulates you from the environment. Poppy, you were talking about earlier this morning, you were talking about situational awareness. That's something we lose completely when we're on our phones. We're siloed in this little bubble, right? Insulated from the environment. And what we argue that this combination of things, the extent to which the phone is private, is associated with a private self, has all this private information on it, images, private messages, and the fact that it insulates you from the environment, from your surroundings, activates a state of private self-focus, which is increased awareness and focus on private inner states, how I feel, who I am, how I'm feeling right now, what do I want. Everything that's very internal, very self-oriented, and not so much focused on the environment. And where we're going with this is this is going to have some downstream consequences. So if I'm using my smartphone, and because of what it's associated with, everything that's the private me, everything that's only me, that only I know, and it insulates me from the environment, that will activate a state of elevated private self-focus, which in turn, what we're studying in this project, or this bundle of projects, it'll influence, first of all, what we actually choose. And one thing we find, I'm going to show you some interesting findings, is that it increases the tendency to choose more unique, more self-expressive types of options. Another thing is, conditional on having chosen something, it also influences how I think of my choices. I think of my choices as more unique. It just makes me feel everything I do is more me, more unique, more distinct. I feel more different from the environment, and that carries over to the choices that I make. And so once I choose something, I tend to see that as more self-expressive, more expressive of the true, authentic self, and that has downstream consequences for how connected I feel to the brand, how much I'm willing to pay for the brand, am I willing to exchange, to part from what I've chosen, and things of that nature. So I'm going to show you some findings along these lines. Again, the basic idea, the phone is just you, and you feel more like yourself, more like who you are when you use your phone. That influences your choices as well as your perceptions. If I have time at the end, and guys, you're going to tell me how much time I have, right? So I'll also show some additional carryover effects on disposition expression. But if not, I think this will be enough. Just a word on assignments. When you work on devices, there's always this question, how do you randomly assign people to devices? So as long as you do it in the lab, it's easy. We ask students to bring their laptop and their smartphone, which virtually everyone carries with them all the time. That's easy, and then we randomly assign them. So we want to keep constant ownership. You always use your own device that you're highly familiar with. It's just what device you use. When we do it online, it's a little different. We developed, and I don't want to waste too much time on this. We developed a procedure for kind of smoothly using a QR code assigning people to different devices. So that was done online as well. Okay. So some studies. I first want to show you the effect on what people actually choose. So choosing more unique and self-expressive options. So this is one example. Well, what does it mean to choose something unique and self-expressive? One example is, for example, choose something that is framed or described to you as customized especially for you based on your preferences. So this is sort of the intro of the study. This is the context of choosing a charity to endorse, to support. We led people through this questionnaire. It was based on Charity Navigator, which is a real website, asking them about their giving habits, what they like to give. The purpose of this is just to create the conditions that will make it somewhat plausible that we sort of know a little bit about that person and their style of giving and what they want to support. It really is immaterial for the results. The critical part of the study comes later. So we tell people, hey, the university is collaborating with some local charities, and we encourage students to show their support for one charity by joining it on their Facebook group. So it's kind of somewhat consequential that in terms of how people perceive that at this point. And then we ask people, well, which of these two charities would you prefer to endorse or to support on your Facebook page? And then one option is framed as, this is based on your unique values and preferences as we measure them. Here's what we recommend for you. And the other one is just what most other people select. So it's like the popular option. And of course, things are counterbalanced and randomized. What we find is that when people use their smartphone, okay, they're more likely to choose to endorse the option that is set to be tailored for them based on their preferences. Here's another manifestation of choosing something that's more unique and self-expressive. This is a different option, a different context. Here, at the end of the study, people are given a choice between two types of chocolates. One of them is sort of commonly available, milk chocolate. The other option is a little more unique. It's a limited edition. Which one would you like to get? Again, that's the end of the study, and they indicate that on their phone at the end of the session. Basically the same pattern. When they use their smartphone, they're more likely to choose the special edition option.
Do you randomize which one is shown first, or?
They were shown side by side, so.
Oh, side by side.
Yeah, or on the same screen. Yeah.
Which one's left and right?
I don't remember, but I can check and to get back to you. Don't have it off the top of my head. Okay, so, but I want to say that we really took great care to randomize and counterbalance things as much as we can because we're aware of those things. When you use your smartphone, things are often presented vertically, so it's very important to counterbalance things for sure. Okay, so just a reminder, this is our framework, right? So I've shown you some examples of choosing more unique and self-expressive options when using your smartphones. And we've done that. We've used multiple replicates, different contexts, different types of products. we try to show the role of private self-focus. How do we know, why do we think that self-focus is driving this? This is a similar study to the charity study, the individually customized options. In a very different context, the context of wine. Here people were had a chance to win a coupon for a bottle of wine. Again, we walked them through a questionnaire that presumably allowed us to tailor their recommendation, especially for them, based on their preferences. This is based on some website that has something similar to this. And then we presented them with two options. Again, one of them framed as based on your unique values and preferences, and the other one is the commonly preferred option, what most other people prefer, and of course, kind of balanced, and so on. And our prediction was, and what we found was that people using their phone tended to prefer, again, the individually customized offer. Here in this study, we also measured private self-focus. If you look at the wording here, I've been, during the study, been very aware of myself, my own perspective and attitudes. That's like the definition of private self-focus, pretty much. This is a direct measure. We had other studies where we used more indirect measures, like use of first-person pronouns, which has been previously associated with private self-focus, and other indirect measures. The results generally converge. What we find is that when people use their phone, they tend to experience elevated private self-focus, and that in turn carries over to influence or is statistically associated, statistically mediates the effect on choice or preference for the individually customized option, or other studies where we used other types of self-expressive options. We also expected if private self-focus is driving this, then people who are chronically inclined to experience greater private self-focus should show less of that effect because it doesn't matter for them which device they use. They're already high on private self-focus, right? And so that's what we find. We found the effect mostly among people who are low in private self-focus at the baseline. That's where, for those people, using a smartphone made a difference. For other people, not so much. And that gave us more assurance that private self-focus had something to do with this. This is a study I really like. So I talked earlier about why we think smartphones has this effect. So smartphones are so personal and unique, but it's not just any smartphone. It's your unique smartphone, right? You said if I borrowed your device, it wouldn't feel the same, right? It feels very different. When I use my own smartphone, I'm in my own little bubble. If I use your device, it's almost like you're hosting me in your house, in your territory, right? It's very, very different. So we expect, if our theory is correct, you'd expect these effects to be pronounced when people use their own phones, but not somebody else's phone. So that's exactly what we tested here in this study. It's a nice study because it also takes care of other explanations like ergonomics, the size of the screen. We're going to hold all these things constant and just change the ownership. Are you using your phone or somebody else's phone? So again, this is the lab. People come into the lab and they either use their own phone or their own laptop, or they're given a laptop that belongs to the lab or a smartphone that belongs to the lab. And we made sure to even match the brand. So if somebody used an iPhone, we gave them an iPhone. If somebody used an Android, we gave them an Android, and so on. We wanted to keep it as constant as possible, even though it doesn't really matter. Once you're in Qualtrics, everything is the same. The interface is the same. You're using the screen anyway. But we did that. It actually was quite difficult to get iPhones. The lab had some Android phones where we had to get old iPhones from faculty and colleagues. And people were very kind. They lent us their devices. So half the participants used their own device, half the participants used the lab device, and I forget which of the previous paradigms that I showed you we used here. I think it was the wine. We had two versions of the study. I think this one is from the wine version, unless this is telling me something else. No. So again, in the baseline condition, when people use their own device, we essentially replicate our effect. People who use a smartphone tend to choose the more unique or non-conforming in this case option more, but the effect pretty much went away when they used the device that did not belong to them. Okay, so it did not go up in the smartphone condition. There's another replicate of this with a different type of choice. So again, it's definitely not due to the screen size, the ergonomics of the device. It's something to do with the connection that you have with that particular device. Okay. So we've looked at the effect on choice, and what I want to look at now is this downstream effect on how I perceive the choices that I've already made. And again, that has some downstream consequences for how connected I feel to the brand, my willingness to pay for the brand, and so on. This is a study, this is an incentive-compatible study where we showed people some poster options, asked them to choose an option, again, using either their own smartphone or their own PC. We did not expect to find an effect of the device on what people chose because everything is, they're all equally self-expressive for different people. There's heterogeneity, but on average, they're equally self-expressive. But we did ask them to rate how they felt about that choice. So my choice, my preference is unique and different. My poster choice shows who I am. The sense that this is just more special. I feel more special, more unique, more different, more insulated from the environment when I use my phone. And as a result, everything that I do, my choices, I just feel more special and unique. And that's what these measures capture. So we did find a difference here. We also asked people, if you had to pay for the poster you just selected, how much would you be willing to pay? This is hypothetical, but we did find a difference in willingness to pay, which was associated with this tendency to perceive the choice as more special and unique, and more reflective of who I truly am. Another version of this, here we look at brand loyalty. So people chose a brand of sneakers, and we measured, again, self-expression is something very similar. The choice I made reminds me of my unique personality, reflects who I am. And then we asked people here, in case your chosen option is temporarily out of stock, would you prefer to wait up to 1 month or get something else immediately instead? Right? So again, people who use their smartphone, again, perceive their choice, rated their choice as more self-expressive, and they had a decreased tendency to be willing to wait. So no, I want that brand that I chose. And this is one way to interpret this is sort of brand connection or brand loyalty. So potentially this has downstream consequences that marketers care about. I do have time, right?
Yeah, you have 10 minutes.
Perfect. So in this last portion of this program, which really consists of several interrelated papers, we look at disposition expression. What does that mean? Our behavior in any given situation is a function of the personality and the situation, right? We've all learned that in Psych 101. We all have chronic dispositions, personality traits, and there are situational influences. And what we choose is some combination of that, some interaction between these two things. There's going to be some variance, and different factors moderate the extent to which our chronic dispositions will tend to manifest in choice in a specific behavior, as opposed to situational influences. What we're saying here is, look, if smartphones somehow make your private self, your true self, more accessible, make you focus on them more, then that should increase the expression of these chronic dispositions in a situation. In other words, the correlation, if you think of it in correlation terms, the correlation between your chronic dispositions and your behavior in a given situation will tend to be higher when people use their smartphone as opposed to their PC. Okay? And we looked at multiple behaviors. We look at self-control. So if you're high in self-control or low in self-control, you will tend to make a choice consistent with that chronic tendency more when you use your smartphone than your PC. We look at risk aversion, maximizing for satisficing, political attitudes, and we'll show you 2 examples. So this one looks at self-control. This was done in the lab. We first measured people's chronic self-control disposition or tendency, and we did that on a lab desktop. So this is a third device, and we did that first. We wanted the measurement of the disposition of the chronic trait to be unrelated to the devices, not be influenced by the device that we use. So that was done first. Then we randomly assigned them to either take out their own laptop or their own smartphone, and then to take the rest of the survey on that device. Okay. And then we found that we use self-control. You really need to sort of tailor the choice to the individual. So, I might struggle with self-control in the context of studying versus partying. So for someone else, it might be eating healthy. Third person, it might be staying fit or working out or something like that. So this is just one example for some those people who got an eating sort of choice dilemma. What would you choose if you for this goal of having self-control, and then consistent with what you might expect, the more chronically disposed to having high self-control people were, the more they tended to choose the healthy option, to choose to study and not party, and so on, in their respective category that they chose. But as you can see, the slope was steeper when people use their smartphone. The relationship between the chronic disposition and choice of the high self-control option was higher in the smartphone condition. Okay. And again, we got very similar patterns in looking at other types of dispositions. I want to show this last example, which I kind of like. It's a little different. When you think of political attitudes, political orientation is not a personality trait in and of itself, but it does capture a lot of personality variables, and it definitely is chronic. It tends to be dispositional. So here in this study, we asked people at the end of the study who they voted for. So that allowed us to broadly categorize them as more conservative, or more liberal, more likely to be Republicans or Democrats. It's about 50-50, not quite, but close. And then we asked them a bunch of questions about the extent to which they endorse or reject different policies related to COVID, which tend to be very polarizing on a partisan basis. And so, you'd expect Republicans to be strongly opposed to something like fining people for violating social distancing rules. And you expect liberals to be more likely to support it, right? And that's what we found. So we found that, not surprisingly, Republicans were more likely to be opposed. Democrats tend to be more likely to be in favor of these policies. But as you can see, this difference was even stronger when people used their smartphone. Okay, good timing, right? So, I think the downstream consequence, the implications for marketers are pretty straightforward, right? If I'm Amazon, if I know what device you're using when you're on my website, I can tell if you're using a mobile device or a PC. Do I want to show you the bestseller option or something that's customized especially for you, for example? So that's pretty straightforward. I think the downstream consequences for product evaluation, regret, satisfaction, brand loyalty, all these things are a little less obvious, but we think they're also very interesting. And the last thing, you think about this expression of personal dispositions and attitudes. Now, these findings have implications not just for marketers, but also for pollsters, even for people like us, for people who collect data using devices, right? It wouldn't hurt to take that into account. What device do people use, and how might that influence what they choose, what attitudes they express, the stability of the attitudes they express over time across instances, and so on. So a lot of interesting things. And just to remind you, in our perspective, all of this is related to private self-focus, the connection that you have with your phone, the focus that it induces on the private self-knowledge, affect, and so on, and all these downstream consequences, which are conceptually very related to each other. All right.
Real quick, I just had a real quick question. Like, do you think that there'd be a difference, and maybe we can have time for 2 questions. Do you think there'd be a difference if you just bought it that week, or bought it a few days ago versus had it for 5 years?
What do you think?
Or 10 years?
What do you think?
I don't know.
Let me ask you. So last time when you upgraded or got a new phone, how fast did you sort of acclimate and
Very fast because I tend to keep my phones so long that I can't stand them by the time I'm done.
oh, okay, so
Because they're
just,
not
you hate it.
Isn't it more about the data that's there and not the device?
Oh yeah, so maybe it's the same
That's
experience if it's the
with-
same type of phone.
Yeah, but what you just said is like right away, like the next day, it's already like your phone. It's
Yeah.
as much your phone as the previous one used to be a day ago, right? It's just, so we actually measured that, and we found no differences. I think that's why. That's the
Yeah.
intuition that as soon as you get a new phone, you reload everything or upload everything. And,
Yep. Good. I think there was.
Oh, we're taking one more question?
yeah, if Nate will.
This is so great. And yeah, I think all of us need on Qualtrics to go back and look at our data, whether people took it on
Right.
which device. But I also do you have a sense of when we use, you can imagine two theories. If we're using our phone, it brings out our true self, or is it that when we use a laptop, it suppresses our true self? I don't know if it makes a difference or your thoughts.
Nice question. So we can't compare it to some other baseline because we had to use some device. We did find that with tablets, I didn't show you this, but we had in another study, we had a tablet condition. We found that tablets were a lot like PCs. So I don't know if that establishes some sort of baseline, but phones are definitely different.
But do you have a hunch which one it is, or that we can't?
I mean, good question. I think when you look at people and we all feel that when we or our loved ones use their phones, they're just not there. They're a different place. It's another place, a different state of mind. To me, that says something. I do think that the phones change our experience, change our focus, and I think that it definitely stands out. When we look at a person using their phone, that's when all of a sudden they don't look the same. To me, that says something about what the baseline is and where the difference occurs. But that's my intuition. Again, it's really hard to establish a baseline because when you're comparing PCs to phones, neither one is natural.
Thank
All right.
you.